Welcome to the Be Well at USASK podcast. My name's Peter Headley. I serve as the Director of Student Affairs and Services at the university. This podcast is for all members of our community. Each week, members of the community will join me to share ideas and provide guidance on all aspects of being well. And we'll be highlighting campus initiatives and resources designed to engage and support you. In these challenging times, we hope the ideas and information we share will help. In this episode, as part of our series during Mental Health Week, I'm going to be talking to Dr. Anita Chakravarti. Anita has been a professor of anesthesiology at the University of Saskatchewan College of Medicine for over 30 years. She is currently the wellness lead at the Continuing Medical Education Office at the College of Medicine and the vice chair of the Canadian Anesthesiology Society New Wellness Committee, which is affiliated with the Canadian Medical Association Wellness Program. Anita is also a certified mindfulness practitioner. In this episode, we're going to be discussing mindfulness in the midst of a storm and its relationship to wellness and resilience. Well, welcome to the podcast, Anita. Thanks for joining me.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Peter. I'm really excited to talk about passion projects of mine.
Yeah, thanks. So can you tell me a little about your career and how you came to make the transition from a focus on anesthesiology to your current work around mindfulness? I'm guessing that's not a typical change in direction.
No, it's not. And certainly I think we can all identify with the fact that things can happen in just an instant. And I grew up in Saskatoon. My dad was a professor. My kids have gone to university. I'm very much grounded here. And when I graduated from College of Medicine here in 82 and then did anesthesia in Edmonton, and I've been back since 1987. But about 20 years ago now, and I was, mid-career, very happy with what I was doing. We went on a holiday and I got thrown off a trail riding horse, and I ended up with chronic pain. And I found out now that it's quite common for most of us to push through and I did for 10 years. And during that time, I worked a lot trying to figure out more information about pain medicine. And I'm very happy to say that with 4 other colleagues across Canada, we actually got a pain medicine subspecialty at the Royal College. But I realized that focusing all my time on my own pain was very challenging. And then I, at a pain conference I was speaking at, heard about physician wellness and mindfulness. And that's what I've been focusing on for the last several years.
Yeah, it is interesting, isn't it, though, those things that can happen to us. And I know you and I have spoken about this before, those change in direction in our careers and actually in our focus. So people may not necessarily understand what mindfulness means. So when you use that word, can you just give us a brief summary of what it means and how it can help?
Absolutely. So let me just preface this by saying when I first started working in this arena over 12 years ago, somebody pointed out the other day, Anita, you don't have to be in sales anymore because mindfulness is everywhere right now through the scientific literature as well as the public literature. And so for me, it's very important to be clear in what it is. And certainly one of the initial definitions was the fact of being aware in one's life. And that emerges through paying attention on purpose in the present moment with a sense of non-judgment. And it's really allowing our lives to unfold experience by experience, moment by moment. One of the things I think that's important to note that a lot of people think mindfulness is going to suddenly make them all zened out and calm. And certainly that can be a byproduct of a regular practice. Byproduct sounds very the wrong word, but it can be an effect. But really it's about how do we have our capacity to be with the present moment just as it is. And I think particularly now during the pandemic, with so many emotions that are arising, it's very, very relevant even during this time.
It's when we reflect upon it, and I know day to day, that we do spend a lot of our time thinking about the past and the future rather than this present moment. And what kind of damaging impact does that, even the agonizing about the past or worrying about the future, actually have on our brains?
Yes, that's a really, really good question. Again, we have to recognize that that's the way human beings are built. The mind that we have that allows us to learn and grow actually has given us the capacity even to do what we're doing right now, the digital connectivity we have during physical distancing, planes flying, cars. What happens is when we start believing every single thing we think, and not looking at it with the perspective of awareness, that's when we can potentially get into trouble. So when we are constantly rehashing the past with our thoughts, I should have done this, I could have done this, why did I do that, why did that person do to me? It's like a loop that plays. And every time we relive those, it's actually shown that our body responds to our thoughts and has those emotions and the effects on our body. Similarly, when we are constantly thinking about the future, and certainly that's very common right now, the anxiety, the incredible uncertainty that we have is, again, we're ruminating. The anxiety, the frustration, the fear is very, very much in play. So how do we then start connecting with this present moment just as it is? So those, the rehashing of the past, rehearsing for the future, and even sometimes resisting the present moment. Yeah, I'm here, we're in the middle of a pandemic, but I don't want this to be like this. So our whole body is in this resistant mode. This is not how I want to be. So literally our mind and our body are interconnected. And now we have the neurobiology, physiology, et cetera, to show how that works. So how do we come into the present moment?
And so in terms of the present moment, and as you mentioned, this period of uncertainty and stress, can we talk a little about how people cope with change and that idea of being pushed out of their comfort zone? Ironically, the comfort zones usually we think of as home, but now that we're many of us or most of us are stuck at home, we suddenly feel that we're being pushed out of our comfort zone by being here.
Yes, again, very, very good question. So when we're in our comfort zone, it's where we're comfortable, where we understand, we feel like we have some degree of control. And yet like you pointed out so clearly, that our comfort zone, which is often our home, is a place where we're working and we're doing our entire life. For other people, home is not always a safe space to be. And I think we have to acknowledge that part as well. And there's lots of other challenges and issues that come up. So regardless of being home, we are definitely being pushed into the next zone, which is often known as the fear zone. And so in fear, we can tend to blame other people, take a victim mentality. We can go into panic. I think that's a very common thing that happens. Will we have enough food? Will we have enough toilet paper? And it's not a critique, but it's very much recognizing that we can actually be in our fear zone. However, if we have some strategies and opportunities, we can learn to perhaps shift into a learning zone where we are taking the information that's coming and very mindfully say, what can I grow and how can I learn from this? What changes can I make? And so what this learning zone gives us an opportunity, if we choose to address it mindfully, is recognizing and acknowledging our own human condition of being in this situation and say, how do I wish to be in this moment? And this is where it's really important because it allows people to reflect and get a sense of what is their meaning and purpose in life and have a moment to respond to these inner and outer stressors as opposed to just reacting. So from learning zone, we can live in a growth zone where we're constantly being aware that even during pre-pandemic times, perhaps that there was opportunities to create and co-create our lives day by day, every moment.
And I think what I'm hearing you say is actually the need to have space to have perspective, but not fearing that space to actually gain the perspective.
Yes. So again, just like our minds rehashing the past, rehearsing for the future, resisting the present moment, our emotions as human beings are very important. And so fear, it's not about not fearing. It's really about being aware that this is what fear feels like. So I've heard many people, and I used to be one, said, oh, I'm so cold, for example. I am so cold. This winter, I've lived here for 45, 55 years. This hurts and I hate it. And why do I live here? So over the last 12 years, I'm realizing that what I can choose is this is what cold feels like in my body. This is how it feels in my sensations. These are the thoughts that come up. And I still have those thoughts of whatever the cold is, or even the emotions of regret or fear, whatever might come up. Similarly, people can say, I am a sad person. I'm really sad about this. And one can choose that perspective just to say that, you know what, this is what feeling sad is like in my body. And literally we do carry our emotions around with us. Or I am an angry person. Some people are that way. Or how about I feel angry. So it's not about not having the emotions. It's not about not having the thoughts. It's about being present with them, acknowledging our humanity, that we are having these feelings, and then stopping and choosing a response.
Yeah, absolutely. In one of the other interviews in our first episode, Tracy Spence was talking about the permission, giving yourself the permission to feel those feelings and not pretending you're not doing that, but to also know that feelings, particularly the situation we're in at the moment, can change a lot in a single day, depending on what you're doing or where you're at. But to allow yourself to acknowledge how you're doing and how you're feeling at any given moment.
Yes. Another, I think, really important analogy, and I do like analogies and metaphors because as an anesthetist, I was very left-brained. It took me a while to sort of embrace a lot of these new ways of being in one's life. Many people think that with mindfulness, it's all going to be calm and serene, calm waters. But really what mindfulness is a way of being in your life. And if we analogy of surfing, for example, it's about learning to surf with the waves of life, whether they be emotions or thoughts. And so just like in surfing, you don't go out in the middle of the storm, in the middle of the oceans with sharks circling to learn to surf. You do it in a safe space near the ocean, the beach, in calm waters. And so there's a practice of mindfulness. It's not something that you do for 1 minute and then it's over. It's something that one can revert to and practice on a moment-by-moment basis. And that's one of the things that I really like to talk about is incorporating all these moments, because a lot of people don't want to take that 20 minutes or don't see the value of a 20 or 45 minute sitting or walking practice. So we can link mindful moments together and create a mindful life with that.
And so you mentioned that sort of taking the time and sitting. If I was listening and thinking, well, this sounds great to me, where do I start? How can I find out more? How can I participate in something either at the university or in the wider community?
That's a really good question, and I keep saying that, but they are very good questions, Peter. There is such a plethora of apps that are out and available right now for mindfulness. I am a little bit hesitant to suggest them because just as we all are individual, we process things differently. Different people, different practices might register with and resonate with people differently. The other piece I think is important to note is that when we tune into one's own life as it is, as human beings, we're very creative about not wanting to deal with things that we don't want to deal with. And it can be in the form of online shopping or, whatever it might be. So certain individuals, it might be better to make sure that it's okay for them to tune in to themselves. And so if there's any history of trauma, for example, there's a trauma-informed mindfulness practice. I think that before suggesting anything like this, that people really understand that tuning into one's life may uncap some uncomfortable things even more so right now, because a lot of us are on the edge. And so that's a caveat that it's not necessarily for everybody, although the scientific evidence shows that it can help in many, many situations. So there are apps. There are opportunities that are coming up for various groups regarding mindfulness. My reason I haven't started online, well, I actually have now with a group of physicians across Canada, but opening it up is because I think very carefully we have to have resources in place for individuals if something comes up. And there are 2 people in the city who are doing mindfulness-based stress reduction work, and they're available. It's right here in Saskatoon, and I believe there's a few in Regina as well. And we're trying to create a network, not only province-wide, but Canada-wide, to identify. These are 8-week programs that involve approximately a 45-minute practice daily that is guided. usually a once a week, 2 to 3 hour class, which I assume now is being virtual. And then usually there is, in the course of 8 weeks, a 1-day silent retreat. So I'm not quite sure how they're doing that right now. But this is the full 8-week course where a lot of the published articles show the benefits of.
And what would you say to people who would say, this all sounds really touchy-feely, soft and fluffy. I just can't see myself meditating. Like, it's just not me. Yeah. But yeah, I'm struggling in my life, but that's just not me. What would your message be to them?
I totally get it. Absolutely. And I think that's becoming sort of my niche, is to approach people who are skeptics. And certainly a lot of healthcare workers are that way. What's really fascinating is what the neuroscience shows. And it's not only just the clinical evidence that shows that this is beneficial in terms of burnout, in terms of improved coping, and those kinds of clinical aspects, but the neuroscience functional MRIs show differences in the way that our brains work. We have a default network called a narrative network. So all the stimuli that we're getting from external, our internal thoughts, emotions, our sensations, we spit out a story or a narrative. And the other circuit is called the experiential network, and these are inversely correlated. And what that means is that when you activate the experiential circuit, the narrative or the storyboard goes down. So why does that help me in my practice? It's because when I realize that I'm spinning, whether it's anxiety or regrets about past or whatever it might be, I realize that by tuning into the present moment experience, I can actually deactivate or lessen the impact of that narrative circuit. So if you go to, for example, a yoga class and they ask you to tune into your breath or tune into your body sensations, what we're doing is we're activating that experiential circuit. So that's a piece of neuroscience that really, really helps me to get on my mat when I don't want to. So there's that evidence base. And there's another component of this when I talked about the non-judgment piece in the definition. When these emotions and sensations, the thoughts arise, doing it with non-judgment is really, really important. And what that translates to is doing it with a sense of kindness or compassion to oneself. And we've shown a huge difference with, for example, with empathy when you resonate with somebody else. I'll often use the SPCA commercials on TV. When you see those animals, you want to change, or you want to change that right away, because that empathic distress that we feel when we're watching that, or we're watching the news right now and what's happening with people, we respond so distressfully, we want to distance ourselves. So empathy is not a bad thing, but rather than with distress or distancing, we can actually do this with compassion. And the empathic distress and distancing networks actually activates our pain circuits in our brain, whereas the compassion piece actually activates the mammalian caregiving oxytocin-based systems. So compassion, non-judgment, kindness, a really, really important part. So we approach ourselves with the same kindness and compassion that we would approach a loved person or family member.
So now I see the connection in your career transition. It seems very clear. I really appreciate that thought about science, but also as you were talking, I was thinking this notion that we're not simply subject to the things that happen to us. We have a level of control. And there was something I contributed to a friend and colleague's book recently, and there was a particular quote that I put in it about how I cope better. And it was, you will continue to suffer if you have an emotional reaction to everything that is said to you. True power is sitting back and observing things with logic. True power is restraint. If words control you, that means everyone else can control you. Breathe and allow things to pass.
That's just lovely. And that's exactly what mindfulness is. It's taking a moment to stop and choose a response rather than literally a vending button reaction. Mm-hmm. I do have to share, I think it's a funny story now. Many years ago when I started doing this practice, my husband would tease me unmercilessly about different things. And he said, and I'd get angry, and this is really important stuff. And he would push my buttons every time. And I realize now, of course, that was my opportunity to have a different response. And he totally supports me, of course, but it's that reactivity. And as I chose to react less and respond, that actually went away.
Yeah, I definitely find that in my own relationships to be way more mindful and present, whether that's, with my family members or friends. So as strange and awful in some ways for so many people as this current situation is, do you think there might actually be some opportunities here for people to improve their health in general, but particularly their mental health?
It's a tough question. There's so much, I've heard it being called an infodemic about productivity during the pandemic. I don't think that's necessarily something that we should aspire to. I'll tell you why. Many people say, well, we're all in the same boat globally. And in some extents, we are. We are so interconnected, and coronavirus has shown us exactly how interconnected we are. However, I prefer an analogy I read about we are all different boats in the same storm. And certainly many boats are crashing and burning right now, whether it's a job loss, inability to put food on the table, inability to see a sick family member who's dying in hospital. There's a lot of stuff happening right now. And recognizing that there may be some people that are going through tremendous amounts of distress right now, and other people may be saying, I'm having so much fun with my kids. We're doing all this. We're baking bread. I'm starting my reading book. So we cannot say that it's the same for everything. So is there an opportunity? Yes. But again, I really emphasize this piece about compassion for yourself is to just acknowledge the human experience. We are all different. And it may be very hard if somebody goes on social media and sees this list of things that people are doing, whereas you're just trying to figure out how you're going to pay the rent this month. So let's be kind to ourselves and acknowledge we're in the same storm. That's our common shared humanity. However, we're all in different boats, and giving ourselves permission to be where we are.
Yeah, it's funny you should say that. My wife and I a couple of evenings ago had a conversation about how smug some of the social media posts are right now of people having read multiple books and run however many 100 kilometers and done fitness things and all these other things. And to say for us with young children, we're just getting through day to day. I think we feel very grateful for how things are. But absolutely, I think that message to see past the end of your own driveway to what other people's experience, even the people who live across the street from you, what that might look like right now, I think that's a really important reminder.
Yes, and I think, too, that we have to also recognize sometimes why people are sharing these things. No one's life is all perfect. And so if this is the one piece of their life that they are feeling comfortable about and they want to share it, that might be in the intention with which they're doing that. So, I totally get that this connectivity that we have through social media can be very negative, but it can also be positive, especially if we say, well, good for them, and having that bit of compassion for them, and then turning that around and say, and I got out of my sweatpants today, or I put on my sweatpants instead of my pajamas, and that's my good thing today. So again, recognizing we're all in it together.
Yeah, I take back my use of the word smug, in which case. So how do we start with incorporating mindfulness practices into our daily lives?
Well, one of the really important pieces to recognize is that people think that mindfulness or meditation practice just involves sitting cross-legged on your cushion or your yoga mat and sitting there for great lengths of time. And what we can recognize is that we can have mindful moments because, as we've discussed, mindfulness is the awareness that comes into our present moment with non-judgment. So how do we start doing that? And that is with these simple moments. I really like to use the analogy of surfing, actually. And many people do that. And lots of people think that mindfulness is just like sitting in calm waters, or if it's really choppy waters, you just by sheer force of will stop that storm from happening. And that's exactly not what it is. It's learning to surf with the waves. So a formal meditation or mindful practice may involve sitting for 45 minutes or 20 minutes or more extended. And that's more like learning to surf near the the shore in calm waters and sunny weather. When we actually learn those techniques, then we can get put into the middle of the ocean with the sharks circling and learn to surf in those choppy waters. Right now, we've already talked about how this is a storm already. So we have to be very gentle as we incorporate mindful moments into our life and just take opportunities to tune in. And when we link all these mindful moments together, we are then presently aware in our life. And whenever you're not aware, as soon as you become aware you're not present, then you are present.
So mindfulness does seem to be very much in the zeitgeist right now, with lots of people reporting benefits from meditation and yoga and mindful practices. Does the neuroscience actually show if this is true and how it actually works?
That's the wonderful part about all this. We have not only neuroscience, but we actually have concrete functional MRI scans that show changes in the gray matter and densities in different areas of the brain with long-term meditation. They've done research on chromosomes. As we age, the ends of the chromosomes, which are like the hard parts at the bit of the end of the shoelaces, tend to unravel. But with long-term meditators, it's shown that they don't unravel as much. And if you have a continued practice, they actually tighten up the ends of those chromosomes that normally come with aging. Lots and lots of clinical evidence, not only for various disease processes, but really to enhance the quality of life. The other piece that's really, I think, important for many of us is that when we're in the caregiving professions, it's very important to sort of stay full and compassionate and kind. So the mindful practice in New York has shown that the well-being of the clinician, the quality of care that one provides a patient or a client, as well as the quality of caring is equally positively impacted. And it was the first time I heard about quality of caring. It's the capacity really to be present with someone else. And the whole area around empathy and compassion has a lot of science around it as well. And I think it's worth repeating here. And when I often use the example of SPCA commercial on TV, with the dogs and animals that have been abused. And oftentimes when we turn on or that comes on, we immediately feel the empathy and we feel sad for the animal. And often it results in distress and we want to turn that off, or we change the channel because we can't handle it. So empathy in itself is not a bad thing at all, because that allows us to connect as human beings. However, it's our reaction to the empathy with distress and distancing that can actually activate the pain circuit. So when you see a pain in another, whether it's an animal, somebody you love who's suffering, it literally lights up our own pain circuits, which is tied into the threat defense, the fight, flight, freeze that we all have heard so well. The compassion circuits, on the other hand, actually activate the oxytocin mammalian caregiving system. And so with stress, whatever kind of stress or pain it may be, we've all been taught fight or flight, fight or flight. However, they have shown that there's a tend and befriend, and that is through this other pathway. And it's, as we know, oxytocin is the love hormone. And so it actually promotes our health and well-being. So explicit training in compassion, along with mindfulness, actually even enhances our well-being even further. So it's really exciting, and I wish I had known this a long time ago, but we only found out relatively recently.
Wow. Well, I think I'm going to park any skepticism that I might have had. So one of the things I know you're going to share with listeners is 3 short guided meditations, and we're going to make these available as separate podcasts so people can access them straightforwardly without having to fast forward through us. Can you tell me a little about what those are going to be and how you'd recommend they be used?
Yes. So first of all, I would recommend that they listen to the podcast before they actually do the meditations themselves. However, I do recognize that some people are already practicing mindfulness and may choose just to tune in to the meditations. There will be 3 of them, and I'm going to time myself and have it about 3 minutes so that they can be accessed easily throughout the day at any time that you may choose. The first one is going to be a body scan, and the reason that we do body scan is because the narrative circuit in our minds is what is our default network. And it takes all this information that we have and it spits out a little bit of a story about what we're experiencing. What we also know, though, is there's an experiential circuit of the body and the breath. So when you're at a yoga class or someone says, okay, just take a deep breath, that's what's really important to recognize, that we are activating that experiential circuit, which is inversely correlated with the narrative circuit. So it actually brings you more into the present moment. So the body scan is a 3-minute version of how to just bring yourself into the moment right now. The second one is a breathing exercise, and that is focusing on the breath as the anchor. And the third one is what I think is quite needed right now, is a self-compassion exercise. We will talk a little bit about, I've talked about compassion and empathy already, but we've shown that compassion and self-compassion are very similar, and to treat ourselves with the same kindness and compassion that we would to someone that we loved is actually very, very beneficial for us. And why is this important? Is because we have that inner narrative that I was talking about. And for many, there's an inner critic, not just a narrative, but the constant feeling of maybe not feeling being good enough, or being found out that you're not who you think you are, or failure of performance. So that's very hard on our bodies. So we'll do a 3-minute self-compassion meditation as well.
And I think we often don't take the time in the day. But I think one of the pieces I pick up on from your comments, we're often much kinder to other people than we are to ourselves, as if we don't deserve that kindness a lot of the time.
Exactly. The imposter syndrome was first described in the late 70s, but it is very much alive and well. And, both genders, it's very, very common, especially I think in this time and age with social media image. Perhaps that's changing a little bit now, I don't know. And that kindness to self is a crucial foundational element of being able to be kind and compassionate and non-judgmental to others as well.
So I'm asking all guests on the podcast to share one thing they're doing right now to be well, perhaps something that brings them joy or connection. What would that thing be for you, and how do you find it's helping?
I feel that for me, and thank you for giving me a heads up that you might be asking that question, because I am incredibly grateful. And you mentioned the word gratitude. So for me, having the gratitude, I have adult children who are in healthcare and being exposed to the things. I have friends across the world, some of in New York and other places, who are going through a lot of bad stuff. But my sense of gratitude is what is really helping me, recognizing every day, refocusing my attention from what may be arising right now. And the second part, and there are two big things, is creating a sense of meaning and purpose in each day. Each day is different for me, and both of those things have really sort of aligned during this pandemic, because it's been 12 years now that I've been doing this work. And for me, the meaning and purpose is, in my journey, recognizing these things that I've learned that have helped me and continue to help me every day, and perhaps even sharing a little bit of what I've learned to others who might be in that situation has really informed me about how I'm passing this time.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And so is there a final thought that you'd want to leave listeners with around the work that you do, or just in general?
In general, I think we can really look at the opportunities by taking a pause and a stop. And we're not doing any practices today, but the stop mnemonic helps me a lot. And stop is S is stop, literally. When you feel out of control with thoughts, emotions, and sensations, stop. I'll often feel my feet, just bring my attention to my feet, literally grounding me. T is take a deep breath. And as I breathe out, I think of these choppy waters, and the exhalation is like a anchor, always observing, what am I thinking? What am I feeling? And again, being able to do so with the kind lens of attention. And then P is proceed. So that would be my final thought, because, it's great talking and I've really enjoyed speaking with you. What are we going to do about it? So the stop mnemonic is something we can walk away with from this time.
Yeah, well, from the UK, back during the war, there was the expression "keep calm and carry on," which I think is sort of the same principle. Well, coming back to the notion of gratitude, I really, really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me today. I know that life is busy and there's lots going on for you. So for you to take the time out and to talk to me and to talk to the listeners, we really, really appreciate it.
Thank you very much again for the conversation.
Thanks for listening to the Be Well at USASK podcast with me, Peter Headley. And thanks again to Anita for joining me and sharing. As mentioned in our conversation, you'll find Anita's 3 guided meditations listed as episodes 12A, B, and C of this podcast. Please check in again for further episodes and more content related to being well. Please subscribe, follow, and share this podcast. We're currently on multiple platforms, including YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. We'd also love to hear from you, so please post comments and questions, and we'll look to include them in future episodes. Also, if there's a person you'd like to see as a guest or a topic you'd like us to cover or a reaction to an episode, email us at bewell.podcast@usask.ca. In the next episode in this series relating to Mental Health Week, I'm going to be talking to Terry Peterson, a counsellor and practice leader for the counselling team at the USASK Student Wellness Centre. We will be exploring self-compassion, healthy relationships, and supporting ourselves during transitions. So until next time, stay safe and be well.